Hello everyone, I'm your hostess with the mostest, 8-Second Gaming, and in today's video we are going to be talking about our early Season 19 tier list. Now Legends didn't receive a ton of changes, but there are still some movements going on in the tiers, so let's break it down. But just quickly, if you guys are looking to take your Apex skill to the next level, then you need to check out the GameLeap website right now. Over there we have top level coaches, including myself, creating the best, most highly informative guides to make you the best player you could possibly be. We have legend guides, gun guides, VOD reviews, and much more, so click the link in the description, pick yourself up a membership, and start to improve today. But okay, with that done, let's hop into things, and I do want to make one thing very clear before we actually get into the tiers. This is an early Season 19 tier list, so before people start commenting, is it a little bit too soon to make these tiers? The answer is just a straight up no. Because of the lack of changes that the Legends did receive, the tiers don't really change that much. The only thing that will really affect the Legends going up or down in the tiers as the season moves forward is the meta, so if the meta does shift, we will reflect that in our mid-season tier list. So with that covered, let's start off with the D tier, and there are actually 3 Legends finding themselves here. We've got Lifeline, Mirage, and Seer. Now Lifeline and Mirage, it's no surprise to find them here. They are just still really bad in the current meta. Out of the 3 Legends here, Lifeline is definitely the strongest, though she does definitely need some serious love. I know she has a very dedicated fan base of players that do play her, but in the grand scheme of the game, she just isn't really that strong. And the same thing goes for Mirage. He has like a cult following, but Mirage doesn't really fit a role on the team. He can do every single role, but he doesn't do them well, and he doesn't actually cover anything that needs to be covered when you do slot him into a team comp. He's not really the go-to type of legend that you should need. Can he be fun? Sure, for some people, and that's why people play him, but he's not a strong legend. And lastly in this tier, we have Seer, and Seer got beat hard by nerfs. He used to be a legend that you had to have on a team or you were just throwing, to being just utterly useless. He doesn't really do anything in fights, he doesn't really offer the information that he should be offering. Did Respawn go a little bit overboard with the nerfs? Kind of, a little bit, but it was needed because Seer was just way too strong. But that's our D tier done, so let's move into the C tier. We've got 2 Legends here. We've got Octane and Rampart. Now, Octane might be a little surprising for some people, but Octane in terms of the game is not actually a very strong legend. His strength comes from how good of a player you are in terms of how much movement you can actually pull off. If you are a player that is really gifted with movement techniques, then yes, Octane is one of the strongest legends in the game, but that is the vast minority of players. Like only 0.00001% of players could actually use Octane's movement to full potential. In a team game, he is just a very selfish legend, and that doesn't really work out in the current meta, so he is a C tier legend. And Rampart is another legend finding herself down here because in the right situation, she can be good. If you are able to set up her walls and people leave you alone and they don't really do anything to bother you while you are sitting behind those walls, then yeah, her walls can be very devastating. Same thing goes for Sheila. If nobody shoots at you while you start to rev up Sheila, then she can be good. But the issue comes when you start to actually fight people that have their monitors turned on and understand what to do against a Rampart. You throw one grenade past the wall and she can't play behind that wall anymore, and you're able to push up for free. She has a lot of holes in her gameplay that do allow her to have a ton of counterplay. And before you guys start bringing up ALGS and all the people playing her there, ALGS is very different. Scrims and tournaments are played very differently. I have hundreds of hours of scrim experience. I've made it to ALGS finals. I know how those games play, and they are very different from ranked. People in those game modes don't do the same things, the fights are not the same, so she is a different legend in those types of situations. But in the actual game, she's not very strong, so she is a C tier legend. But that's our C tier done, so let's move into our B tier. We've got 5 legends here. We've got Ashe, Ballistic, Catalyst, Fuse, and Vantage. Now Ashe does break my heart to put her here because she is a very unique legend. I think she has a unique playstyle, and I would love to see her become more meta. But right now, that just is not the case. She has become even worse in the current metas, and she's just been slipping even further down the ranks. I think her tether and her portal both need some love before she actually can become a meta legend, but right now Wraith's portals are just better than her. Revenant is a better option for off angling. If you want to single out legends, again, Revenant's just a better option, so Ashe just sadly goes in the B tier. And next up we have Ballistic, and you know, Ballistic B tier, it fits. He doesn't really have a whole lot going for him, but where he does actually start to shine is where he can just buff everybody on his team to have infinite ammo, speed boost, and give himself a gold gun. Infinite ammo in fights can be very clutch, especially in endgame situations where you might have been poking all game or trying to defend your spot and you might be running low. There have been games where I have lost because I've been trying to fend off people from my spot and I've run out of ammo in doing so, and we don't really have any options in the endgame. In those types of situations, ballistic can be good. And there are a few other niche situations where he can be good as well, so he does kind of feel like a just solid middle of the pack legend in the B tier, so that's why I'm putting him here. But next up we have Catalyst, another legend that was super good that just got hit with a bunch of nerfs. She was a very strong legend and the meta was favoring around her. Bangalore and Catalyst were running amok last season, so Respawn did have to nerf them, but Catalyst is now just weird. Her Q does not go as far, she doesn't have as many, her ult isn't as strong as it used to be. She can really only throw her Q balls basically as far as a Caustic can throw his gas barrels. It's very weak. So she did go from being a very solid control legend, being able to be more scrappy in those types of situations, to now being a control legend that really has to set up in those types of fights. She's not as spur of the moment, she's not as good in those fights, so she does fall into the B tier. And next up we have Fuse, and Fuse has been seeing a little bit more play in the meta. The whole death ball run over your enemies as fast as you can kind of does favor him because he can just send knuckle clusters and grenades, but at the same time it doesn't favor him in the exact same way, because if people are running at you death balling, then your grenades and your knuckle clusters are not going to work out. Fuse wants to make it hard for people to play the same spot in a fight. If they try to take cover, Fuse wants to say nuh-uh and make them move based off of his tactical or his grenades. But right now, people aren't really staying in the same spot in fights. They are constantly moving. It is a death ball style of meta. And then that's where some people might say, well, what about his ultimate? His ultimate makes it so that people have to stay in the same spot. And you would be right if like 90% of legends didn't have a way to get out of it built into their kit. And if they don't have one built into their kit, then you can just run out of the flames before they activate if you are fast enough. His mother load needs a little bit of love before it's actually a devastating ultimate and makes it so that he could move up in the tiers. So right now he is a B tier legend. But next up we have Vantage, and Vantage is one of the few legends that did receive a buff going into season 19. They added one more bullet onto her sniper rifle. And Vantage is a really low-key, under-the-radar type of legend. She is very strong in team fights with her ultimate, allowing people to do more damage and also being able to see where people are. She gets a ton of passive information, and she has a really good relocation tool with Echo. There's two main issues that Vantage does fall into that keeps her in the B tier. Number one is her hitbox. She's a very large legend, and she doesn't have fortified for how big she actually is, which is a little bit of a downside for her. And on top of that, she really doesn't fit into a role either. She is technically a support legend because she likes to be in the backline, she likes to anchor, but she doesn't really have anything to help her be a support legend other than her ultimate. If they gave her a little bit of a buff to a kit, maybe gave her fortified, maybe give her a little bit faster activation time on the echo jump, then she could definitely move up, maybe even be a circularly broken legend once again. But right now, I think she's a solid B tier legend. But that's our B tier done, so let's move into our A tier, and there are 7 legends finding themselves here. We've got Caustic, Watson, Gibraltar, Horizon, Mad Maggie, Pathfinder, and Valkyrie. Now, Caustic and Watson are basically the same thing, so I'm going to talk about them at the same time. They are very good at doing what they need to do. They control buildings, they control areas, and they get your team to the end game position. If you want to play for hard zone, they are the ones that you definitely want to pick up because they can control buildings and make it very hard for teams to siege them. Once you lock down an area, you make it very hard for people to actually want to push you. Now, once it does actually get to the end game situations, Caustic is a little bit better in my opinion because he's a little bit more set and forget, and you can use his barrels to take away a ton of space from other teams. Watson is good because she can slam down a generator, make it so that you don't get naded out, but she needs to physically place her fences, and she can't really take away spots from other teams because she has to be beside her fence when she is placing it. So in my opinion, Caustic does get a slight edge in this meta, but they are still basically the same character, so they're both going in the A tier. Next up we have Gibraltar, and he is a legend that was king and then fell, and now he's making a return into the meta and he's crawling his way back. He is still a very solid pickup. He is the best poking support legend because of the gun shield, and he does have a very solid res. It does rely on the bubble, so it does lose some points there, but it is faster and it does also give your team a little bit of a spot to play, especially in the end game situations where people are fighting all around you. It gives you a little dome of protection, which is its whole purpose, but you know what I'm saying. His ultimate did receive a buff very recently as well, so it does come back a lot faster. so you do have a very devastating ult on a lower cooldown, which is good. He also doesn't have a ton of counters in the meta anymore. Seer was like the main one because he could stop the res, especially in the bubble, but the only two counters that remain are Mad Maggie and Crypto, and they aren't as seen as they used to be. They are still pretty frequent, but it does require a little bit of setup for them to counter you, so Gibraltar does make his way back into the A tier. Next up though, we have Horizon, another legend that has received a bunch of nerfs, but does actually feel pretty balanced now. Her gravity lift, not as devastating as it used to be, still really good, still a really good height taking tool, and still a very good tool to use in fights. And her ultimate is just as strong as it's ever been. It's not as devastating as it used to be, but it's still a very good ultimate to end a fight all on your own. You throw your ultimate, you suck all three of them in, you throw some grenades, you kill all three of those people at the same time. It is great at ending fights quickly, and in these types of metas where the fights need to end fast, Horizon is a great addition to your team in order to do so. The only issue with her is that she's not overly broken as she used to be, so she doesn't make her way to the S tier, though I do think she is a good A tier legend. And next up we have Mad Maggie, another sleeper pick on my list, but not sleeper enough to make it into the secretly broken tier. Mad Maggie loves these scrappy, fighty types of metas. She likes to be in the fight. She likes to be in the fray. She wants to deathball with her team with the ultimate, and she makes it so that people aren't able to play spots just as well as Fuse, but a little bit better because she actually likes to be in these types of fights. And if people are doing it to her, she isn't afraid either, because if somebody's running at you full speed, just throw your ball at them, cut them off halfway, stun them with the ball, and then you have the advantage on the fight now. Maggie's still a solid legend. Pick her up if you like to fight. And next up we have Pathfinder, another legend that did receive a buff going into season 19. He can now scan the care packages after your team has scanned them to get his cooldowns back, which is very solid for him. It's one of those issues that did pop up, especially when you are solo queuing. But even if you were in a 3-stack, sometimes your teammates looked at a care package a little bit too long by accident and they took away your cooldowns. But now that doesn't happen, but it's not a big enough change for Pathfinder to move him any higher in the tiers. He still has the two big issues that he had before, and that is his cooldowns are still way too long. His grapple cooldown is a huge hindrance to him, and his hitbox is massive. He is another legend like Vantage that is too big to not have fortified. Pathfinder is a walking fridge. You can close your eyes, turn your monitor off, go up and make a sandwich, and you'd still be able to one-clip a Pathfinder. These issues are holding him back a ton, but even though they are holding him back this much, he still makes it to the A tier, so that says a lot about how good this character actually is. And the last one up in the A tier is Valkyrie. Now, Valkyrie has been changing a ton in the metas. She used to be S tier, then she dropped down a little bit, now she's moving her way back up, and I do think she has found a solid spot in the A tier. She's not a must-pick legend. She's not one of those legends that you have to have on your team or you're not going to be winning the game. She does offer a decent amount to the team, though with the introduction of the redeploy balloons, she isn't as useful as she once was. The redeploy balloons, while not as good as a Valkyrie ultimate, are still a very solid replacement if you don't have a Valkyrie, so you have so many rotation options even if you don't have Valk ultimate. And I know some people do like to say that Valk did get a buff with the redeploy balloons because you could just fly around and scan people, but the scan isn't that strong. It's not the strongest part of Valkyrie's kit. As long as you are actually paying attention to where you're flying, you shouldn't need the scan. The strongest part in Valkyrie's kit is by far her jetpack. The type of mobility and control that you have with Valkyrie's jetpack is unrivaled by any other legend. All of the legends that have the same vertical height don't have the same control that she does over how far or how high they want to go. That is Valkyrie's bread and butter. That is her strong point, and that is what's keeping her in the A tier. Without her jetpack, I do think Valkyrie falls even further in the tiers, maybe even down to C tier. So if they nerf that for some reason, I don't know what to tell you Valk players, but for right now, he's an A tier legend. But now we can move into the secretly broken tier. This is a legend that is flying under the radar for a lot of different people, and there's only one legend here, and it is Crypto. Now, Crypto has a very love-hate relationship with a lot of people in the community, but seriously guys, Crypto is one of the strongest legends when played properly. He wants to play for zone. He wants to sit on his Game Boy. He wants to just chill and hang out in a building. And right now, that's what the meta is a little bit more like in ranked. People like to play for the end zone circles, and Crypto loves that. He can get your team so much information while doing it safely because he doesn't have to risk himself in order to do so. You're just risking the drone and then it just goes on cooldown, and then you can just get more information once it comes back up. And once you get to those final circles where it's really small and Crypto can EMP everyone, those are just free cleanup kills. But on top of his really strong kit, Crypto also did receive a silent buff going into this season, and that is when you respawn your teammates, they respawn with their armor and weapons. Crypto has the ability to res his teammates from a distance and be safe while doing so, but previously if you resed your teammates while you weren't around, if somebody were to rush that respawn, your teammates were just left out to dry. But now, because they respawn with their armor, a gun, and ammo, they have a fighting chance as soon as they come out, so Crypto doesn't have to risk himself, and your teammates aren't risking themselves either. That is a huge buff for Crypto and puts him into the secretly broken tier, so do not sleep on him this season. But now we've made it to the top, the S tier, the best of the best, and there are actually 6 legends find themselves here because we're actually in a really balanced point in the meta right now. It's really surprising to say, but yeah, 6 legends. We got Bangalore, Bloodhound, Loba, Newcastle, Revenant, and Wraith. And starting off, we have to talk about Bangalore because everybody was a little bit nervous going into the season that she was going to be ruined, but she's still really strong. She's not as strong as she used to be, but as long as you are good with your cooldown management, she's still a super oppressive legend. She still does everything that she used to do, she still does it extremely well, and she's still an S tier legend. So if you were a Bangalore main before, don't be afraid because she's still a strong character. Next up, we have Bloodhound, another staple S tier legend. With Seer falling so far in the meta, Bloodhound is the go-to scan character. If you want wall hacks in fights, Bloodhound is the way to go. If you love getting information for your teammates, if you love being aggressive while doing so, Bloodhound can do that. And with their ultimate up in fights, they're just an absolute machine. They just run around doing everything and just can clean up so many kills. I used to be a Bloodhound main. I still love Bloodhound. They're still an S tier legend, so here they stay. And next up, we've got Loba, another very solid S tier pick that a lot of people seem to forget about lately. She's one of the best, if not the best, solo queue legends. She's a very solid secondary fragger that can take aggressive off angles. She can get gear for her team. She can get meds for her team. And even though she is a secondary fragger, she is in the support class in game. So if you do have to get away from a fight, you can craft your teammates banners and get them back alive, which again did get a buff this season because they come back with their armor and weapons, so it's not as detrimental to leave a fight and let your teammates die just to craft their banners. Loba is going to stay in the S tier for probably a very long time unless they absolutely gut her kit next season, so until then, S tier. And the next legend we have is Newcastle, and Newcastle, guys, seriously, still very strong. I've been talking about Newcastle a lot recently, but that's because he is ridiculously strong. And they buffed him going into season 19. They made his ultimate, which was already one of the best ultimates, if not the best ultimate for support characters, even stronger. Newcastle, honestly, just so good, so strong. You're definitely going to want to use him. You're definitely going to want to play with him if you are a support character that likes to be in the back line. And next up, we have Revenant. Now, he was in the secretly broken tiers last 2 tier lists that we did, but now he's just taken his place in the S tier because he's not so secretly broken anymore. People understand how good he is. People understand how to play around him, and people understand that he can be a huge issue when just left to his own devices. He's a very hard, aggressive, off-angling secondary fragger that loves to just jump in when the moment's right. And with how much shield he can get off of his ultimate and also conduit, he can be an absolute menace in team fights. So yeah, S tier, I don't think there's anybody that can say anything otherwise. And then we got Wraith, the Queen of Portals, the staple S tier pick that has been basically S tier since the game came out. There have been a few times where she has fallen out of S tier, but for the most part, she's always been an S tier legend. She makes portals, she gets her team from point A to point B safely, she can do everything she needs to do safely, she can play extremely split from her teams because she does it safely, and her passive got a little bit better this season with being more consistent. There's not really a whole lot that you can say about Wraith that hasn't been said already. She's just an S tier legend. All of the S tier legends right now are just basically S tier legends that have been S tier for a while, so yeah, S tier is very easy to go over. But now I know that you guys might be wondering, well, I've gone through this entire tier list and I haven't mentioned the new legend, where does she fit in? And that's because Conduit is an S tier legend, straight up so good. She's not secretly broken because I think a lot of people understand how good she is just right off the rip, and people are not going to be underestimating her going into the fights. She is a fighty, scrappy support that can actually be in the fight, not holding down the back line like other supports usually do. Her passive gives her a speed boost so that she can keep up with her entry fragger. She has a tactical that gives her entry fragger shields after they take the initial brunt of the damage, and her ultimate allows you to lock down areas so you can either funnel teams or make it so that they can't push you. She's an extremely strong legend. I actually don't think we've seen a legend that has come into the game this strong in a while. The last few times legends have been released, they've been pretty cool, we've liked them for a little bit, and then they do kind of fall out of the meta. But seriously, I think Conduit is going to be one of the strongest legends this season, and I think she's going to be making her way into a lot of different team comps. But let me know if you change any legend placement in the comments down below, and if you guys want to stay up to date with the latest and greatest Apex Legends tips, tricks, and news, don't forget to smash the like and subscribe button. Thanks all for watching once again, mates, game, and I'll see you guys in the next one.